So I'm Jack Morrigan. I used to study medicine and worked briefly as a psychological researcher until I started having spiritual experiences. And now I work as a spiritual healer, guide, and channel. I was atheist for most of my life, and I really wasn't interested in spirituality and didn't have much of a call toward it. I just saw spirituality as like similar to religion. And for me, that didn't really have an appeal. I was very much in a scientific mindset and had quite a difficult childhood growing up. Really forgiven my family members for that, but it was challenging. And I used drink and drug to help to cope with that situation. And then I went through a spiritual shift when I was about 26 years old, pretty much spontaneously. I was just watching a video by Eckhart Tolle, and it was the first kind of video that I'd ever watched of a spiritual teacher. And it caused my mind to become very still. And I practiced meditation for the first time, just spontaneously as a result of that. It led my mind to become completely free of thoughts for about 20 minutes. And during that time, I experienced this deep inner calm and this presence shining through everything that I could see and hear. And it was a major turning point in my life. Even though I'm speaking on the level of words at the moment, you may be able to feel, if you're sensitive, that I'm also transmitting that same presence as I'm talking. And that's really the main message that I want to share is through this energy that has been awakening in me over these past 10 years or so. So I had this wonderful experience and it was really lovely. And then about 6 months after that, I was listening to another Eckhart Tolle talk, and he mentioned a teacher called Ramana Maharshi, who's a Hindu saint from the 20th century. And I thought, well, if Eckhart has given me these incredible experiences and Eckhart is recommending this guy, then this guy must be amazing. So I'll check him out. And I got hold of this very small little booklet by Ramana Maharshi called Who Am I? Or Nanya in his native Tamil. And I practiced what he wrote in there in a very disciplined way. I took what he said literally. So he said, every time a thought arises, inquire, to whom does it arise? And follow that thought back to its origin. It's like you're turning your mind in on itself and back to itself. So I did that literally every single time a thought arrived for about a week. And to my surprise, it triggered something that I now know is similar to a near-death experience, if not actually a near-death experience itself. And I just want to say, I think one of the interesting things about my story is that it shows that you can have a near-death experience in a variety of different ways. Of course, the most common way is where someone is in physical danger, and then their mind is being propelled into a place that they wouldn't normally go, a place closer to heaven often. But what happened to me was I had an experience similar to that, but through meditation. And for some of you, you'll be aware that meditation can take you into these death-like states. It's often talked about in spiritual books. You can transcend the ego, or a part of the ego can die through meditation, and that's often sought after in many of the traditions of the world. And I believe that's what I went through. So even though I wasn't in physical danger, I was literally just asleep in my bed, I was in a kind of egoic danger. So the meditation practices that I had done initiated an ego death. And I experienced that just like a near-death experience. So I was in a dream, and I was having a lucid dream, and there was a man in front of me who looked Indian and looked like, if you've ever seen the Hindu saints who were wearing like a little loincloth, like a little white loincloth. He was like that, just sat cross-legged in the lotus position in front of me. And he had an intensity about him, just like a calm intensity. And we were having a dialogue. Well, really, he was just telling me stuff. And he said to me, feel the awareness in your left hand, feel the awareness in your right hand. So I brought my attention into my hands and I could feel, okay, I've got my left hand over here, I've got my right hand over here. I can feel them in space. He says that, and then he says, the hands are different. Okay, left and right, I can feel that. And then he says, the awareness is one. And for some of you, that will be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, that's an interesting thing to think about in my mind. But for some of you, that will be like, whoa, hold on a second. That's true. There's a truth to that, and there's something powerful within it. And that's what happened to me. It initiated this very powerful reaction inside of my mind. And my mind kind of almost collapsed. It's like my dream world collapsed just into darkness. And I felt this very strange feeling. It felt as if my spine was rotating backwards, like 360 degrees. Like my spine cannot physically rotate backwards that much, but that's how it felt like. And it reached a point where there was a bit of pressure, and then there was a loud crack as it pushed beyond this point. And when that happened, I was just in darkness. So total darkness. And then in the distance, there's a point of light. And the point of light started to grow. I didn't even feel like I was in a body or anything. It's just like I was just this floating awareness is what it felt like. And as the light grew, there was a rising of ecstasy inside of me, like a sense that this was incredibly blissful, and also a sense of total fear, like the most intense fear and the most intense ecstasy that I've ever experienced. And it just kept on rising. So the closer the light got, the more ecstasy and the more fear there was. So I knew that there was something good in this light. You know, it felt like a good thing because it was so blissful, but it also felt like it was terrifying. Like the very fabric of that I had built my life on was being unwound. And it was a very frightening experience. But thankfully, it reached a point where the light was basically all that I could see. And then I could feel this presence around me as if it was some kind of being that was outside of myself, like a loving, supportive guardian. And I could feel from that guardian this invitation, like, do you want to cross over into the light? To which I replied, no, absolutely not. That's the most terrifying thing anyone has ever suggested to me. Like, to cross over into that would be total annihilation. And I can feel that it's very nice and everything, but there's no way I can cross that line. And then this presence had the quality of like a loving parent who is going to do what's necessary for the child, even if it means temporarily going against that child's wishes. And it just gave me this gentle push, like over into the light, almost as if to say, this is going to be good for you. And when it did, all of the fear just completely disappeared, as if it had never been there at all. And in its place was just the experience of being in the light. So there was this vast ocean of golden light. And, you know, as I'm talking about this, you'll probably be able to feel it because that feeling hasn't really ever left me ever since. And it's almost as if a doorway has been opened inside of me and it just shines out. So, you know, listen to this story on the intellectual level and take it in. But really, most of what I'm sharing, as I mentioned before, is coming from the energy of that place that is still alive in me. So I don't know how long I was in that ocean of light for. It was very, I mean, incredibly pleasurable, and also just like so stimulating that it wasn't really possible to gauge time. Like my mind was very much taken up with the intensity of it all. But just this beautiful golden white light throughout this ocean. And at some point, a thought arose in my mind of, well, I hope that my body's okay. And then I went back into my body and I could feel that same blissful energy moving up and down my spine at incredibly fast speed, like lightning. My spine was in a very strange position, very erect. I was just drenched in sweat. And then I basically passed out after it calmed down a little bit. And since then, my life has never been the same. It's one of those things that happened that has completely transformed my experience of life. And that's really what I would love to share about, because the experience itself is interesting. And, it took me to a certain place and it was beautiful, but it's what happened afterwards that has been so incredibly life-changing. So it's like being in that light turned up the brightness of my consciousness, and it was just permanently turned up from that moment on. And that meant that I started having experiences that I previously had thought were strictly in the realm of sci-fi and fantasy, which I loved. I loved sci-fi and fantasy, but I didn't believe that that was actually real. That's crazy to think that those things are real. That's how I was brought up. I studied medicine for 3 years, and then I worked in psychology, and I was very much in this scientific mindset and an atheist. So it was surprising, to say the least, that I then started having out-of-body experiences, um, which are themselves like a little near-death experience. There's each one that I've had has felt like dying a little. And in some of the near-death experience accounts, it sounds like very similar to an out-of-body experience. And in those experiences, I went to different realms of existence, met these incredible beings like angels who started to explain to me what life is and how life is so much bigger than I could have ever imagined. And the way that they explained that to me was really through a transfer of energy more than anything else. I remember going on a walk with one of these angels through some heavenly place. And I just remember being completely in awe of the energy beneath their words. So this angel speaking to me, and I don't even remember what they were saying, but I just remember being my heart overflowing because I had no idea that a being could exist that has so much pure love within it. And spending time with those beings started to change me. It started to wash away some of the stuckness and the negativity that had been inside of me for so long, and that is still there. I'm still in this process of it, this cleansing out. That happened with angels, and that I began to be able to see and feel energy. So the light that I had been in, I began to be able to see and feel it in and around everything and everyone that I came in contact with. And I started to notice that if I looked at someone and they were sharing something really deep from their heart, something very true and authentic, there would be this like flowering of light shining out of them to the extent that I couldn't even see their face anymore. It would just be this beaming light. And that over the years, I realized that by witnessing this light and this process, it somehow supported the birthing of that light into the consciousness of that human being. Like the light needs to be seen and witnessed in order to embody itself more fully into this living world that we are a part of. Speaking of living worlds, one of the big things that happened was this descent of consciousness. So initially I had this very kind of up and out kind of experience with going to these heavenly realms and meeting angels. But what happened over time was this reversed descended movement where the light that I had found in these higher places started to lower itself into my body and into the earth through the soles of my feet. And through that, I started to become aware that the earth is alive, that she is a spiritual being with a massive, radiant spiritual heart at her center, and that my soul is actually a part of her soul, and that her soul is a part of the soul of the cosmos, and that we are all united as like beams of soul light shining out of the single sun that is the entirety of the cosmos. But across this huge living cosmos, there are countless beings that regulate the spiritual and physical evolution of this cosmic being, just like a body regulating itself through the smaller parts of itself, like its cells, like its blood vessels, etc. And over time, I became more and more in contact with different, if you like, blood vessels within the body of the cosmos. So I was walking through London one day and saw this huge dragon in the sky, this huge green dragon, and it came over to me and started talking to me. And at this point, I thought I was crazy. I was like, I can believe in angels and I can believe in goddesses and things that had already visited me, but dragons, that's going a step too far. So I blocked it out. But more recently, I rekindled my connection with them during a trip to Mount Etna, which is one of the largest active volcanoes in Europe. And they returned to me and started to explain about the nature of the cosmos and how human beings are part of a single cosmic family. And they basically said that they come from the center of the cosmos in the same way as arteries come from the heart in the center of the body, and that they deliver life force throughout the cosmos in the same way as arteries deliver blood. And that for a long time, humanity has been disconnected from this life force and from the beings like them, dragons, who provide it, but that we can return, and that in fact, we are in the middle of a great return of living knowledge, life force, from the center, the heart of the cosmos, to the earth and to humanity. And they began to flow that life force and that energy into me. And those of you who are sensitive will be able to feel that now as I'm talking. That's the main, as I said before, that's the main message that I'm really bringing through here, this shining, living energy. So I come from this background in medicine and psychology and atheism, and I'm very aware that talking about dragons will sound mad to many people, and that's okay. What's happening is that we're in this year of the dragon at the moment, so quite a lot of people are being drawn to the dragons and the teachings of the dragons. So I trust that the correct people will find this, and you can go on your own journey of exploration about whether or not this feels true and accurate for you. I think one of the big things that this experience showed me was how interconnected we all are. And generally, we experience life as if we are separate. We feel that we are separate from the world around us, and that we are just on this world, which is like an object somehow floating through space. And we just kind of have to do the best that we can to keep ourselves afloat in this very strange and disconnected universe. It has this kind of cold harshness about it sometimes. Sometimes that can then be reflected into our relationships and into our families, and this sense of not truly being together with one another. And I mentioned at the beginning that like I had quite a difficult childhood, and that's true. And it's left me with some challenges in my life as a result of that. And I used to hold a huge amount of resentment toward my parents and my family because of that. And one of the things that this experience has given me is the realization that actually my parents weren't doing anything wrong. They were just following out a natural flow of energy. So something that the dragons say is that the universe moves through seasons. So part of the universe will be in summer while another part will be in winter. And when in summer, things are light and open, and there's a sense of connectedness and unity with one another and with all parts of life. But as there is a movement into autumn and then into winter, there is an increasing level of disconnection. So the beings in those parts of the universe that are in winter will feel more disconnected from themselves, from the beings around them, and from the cosmos. And that gives rise to all sorts of pain and suffering and resentment, a sense of being abandoned by life, and a loss of the memory of life truly being there alongside us. But there is an inevitability to this movement of seasons, and winter does not last forever. Winter will always give way to spring. And as it does, the first flowers that come up through the snow begin to open their petals, and we see the flowering of the first flowers of spring. And what the dragons say and what I feel and believe is that we are in that process right now. In many ways, humanity is crumbling. There is this huge weight of disconnection that we're seeing play out all across the world. And that can feel very overwhelming and soul-crushing at times. But alongside this chaos and this dissolution, there is a new rebirth happening within the hearts and minds of many people around the world. There is a greater opening, and people are letting go of the sufferings and the resentments and the grudges that they hold. And in their place are this flowing unity and heartfelt sense of interconnectedness with one another. And for me, that's been playing out with my family, although there are still family members that I have little or no contact with. I now have a better relationship with my mum than I've ever had. And that feels like this very, very welcome reunion. That the love that I always felt for her, that I told myself that I didn't for many years because of the resentment and the pain that I suffered through, has finally begun to thaw and open, and I can feel that love for her again. So I say this because I'm sure many who have had near-death experiences or similar experiences are aware that it can lead to these massive transformations in our lives. So the experience itself is interesting. I think for me, it's always like the after effects that are where, like my teacher Fran used to say, where the rubber meets the road. For us to really make the most of these experiences, we need to truly live and embody the wonderful openings that we experienced at that time. So I just want to thank all of you for listening to this. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you to the other side, NDE, for having me on. I just want to say that each and every one of you is a part of this living world and a part of this living cosmos. And even though you may be struggling and suffering in your life, you may feel like you're disconnected and alienated and alone, there is a huge wealth of support out here that exists and is open to you. And I hope that in feeling my energy today, you've been able to feel some of that support that exists, and just allow that to sink into your heart and know that you are protected and safe, and that everything will be okay in the end.